Could laughter be the medicine that your bank account needs to feel viable and plausible in order to operate? Because after all, more people are searching for ways to laugh and are willing to support brands and people that make them do just that. It's under that context that today I want to examine the economic impact of laughter. For comedians and fans alike, it's a chance to connect on an intimate and inclusive level to ensure that everyone's state of mind and perspective on life can remain lighthearted and, when appropriate, humanly sensible and humorous. However, in case you wanted the concrete numbers on why making people laugh has benefits to your bottom line, don't you worry, because I've come equipped with those numbers and answers as well. It's estimated by my friends over at Oracle that 88% of today's consumers are looking for brands and people that can make them laugh or smile. 91% of people would prefer brands that were funny, and 72% say they would choose a brand or person that made them laugh over their nearest competitor who did not. However, it appears that leaders across the country in America are fearful of using comedy and humor because of the interactions that they may receive at a clip of 95%. However, my friend Leanne Linsky is helping to change the narrative and tell a more inclusive story. She's a comedian turned entrepreneur and the founder of the new online comedy club known as Plausible. It's a global live streaming comedy platform that connects both comedy fans and comedians alike. The member-based site has people enjoy both comedy shows and podcasts that are interactive. Comedians have the ability to create, schedule, and manage their own online events. And as for the fans, when they choose to consume a comedy show on Plausible, they're supporting independent comics from all over the world. At the end of the day, Plausible is simply a new, innovative platform which gives you a reason to discover a new reason to laugh. And, quite frankly, we can all use more laughter in our lives. So Leanne joined me this week to tell me more about the platform itself, her journey as a comedian, and the transition to an entrepreneur, and why it's important for her to make people laugh and smile. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Leanne, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you all about comedy and laughter, which more people need in their lives. So I'm delighted to be in conversation with you today, and I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, Leanne, I want to ask you, what do you say that when you cross a comedian turned entrepreneur, you get a lot of reasons to laugh straight to the So tell me about your story and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
Sure. So that's a great question, right? I, I've been doing comedy. Let's put it this way. I took my very first comedy class in 2001. So it's been over 20 years. And once I took that class, I then signed up for improv classes and I fell in love with the art. And I've been doing it ever since in some form or another. And eventually, I got into stand up, and when I started, I was living in Las Vegas. I'm not originally from Las Vegas. I'm originally from the Midwest. And, and then there I was doing it. I had a job I loved. I ended up getting laid off of my job after 13 years. And my friends were like, "Hey, you said if you didn't have that job, you moved to New York." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I did say that." So I'm like, I better do that. So I packed 2 suitcases and moved to New York City. And I continued immersing myself in classes and the whole actor's life and comedy and doing everything I possibly could to just learn more and be better. And after 9 years in New York, I ran an open mic for 7.5 years, and I performed. I did my own one woman show. I did theater. I did commercials, and then I moved to LA. And I found myself just sitting in traffic a lot, and more than I was on stage. I'm like, this is, bananas. How can I still work out all of my new material without breaking the bank in gas and time? And so I was like, what if I do things online? And this was before COVID, mind you. And I was like, what about Skype? And people were like, Skype. I was like, yeah, good point. And so a couple of years later, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna start doing some things online. And so I started using Zoom. And this was again before COVID. It was actually in August of 2019, BC, before COVID. And then everybody's like, oh, this is really cool. Then the pandemic happened. Everybody did things online. But during that time, I was like, although it's great to do things with existing technologies, how can I make it better? But to your question, this does tie into your question of like laughing all the way to the bank. What does that mean? When you cross a comedian and an entrepreneur, and I was like, oh, you could laugh all the way to the bank. One way you can laugh to the bank is because, little known fact, comedians don't always get paid. And more often than not, we don't get.
No,
Yes.
eh,
Yes, hilarious, right? And oftentimes we pay to play in some form or another, whether it's we take a ton of classes at a club and hope they like us, and maybe we'll get past there, or we intern at a theater and we sell tickets, and for every ticket we sell, we get a minute of stage time, or sometimes they pay us with like a free drink or food, or maybe some tips. But typically it's not much later and, after years of doing it where we actually start making any significant amount of money. So that's one way, laughing to the bank. But then I also look at it as like, what if we get creative? There's other ways people can make money doing comedy. And especially when I started experimenting with technology, and I was like, what if we take the typical business model of the comedians and flip it and give the comedians and artists more control over how they make money. And that's why I was like, now we can laugh to the bank. Because what if we took control of that situation and created our own environment where everybody could get a piece of the pie, and we could make comedy more accessible? So that's what I did.
yeah, and just before I ask you about plausible, I also wanted to ask you about, the economic impact of comedy. As you said, coming out of COVID, people are looking for ways and reasons to laugh more. And there's been some statistical evidence, actually, that people will support brands and people that make them laugh. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on the economic impact of comedy and what that means to you.
Yeah, I think I definitely think there's a economic impact to it. Just looking at live streaming on its own, if we look at the statistics in that, comedy is the second most popular genre of live streaming, only second to breaking news. That's huge, right? Like that covers a mass of people um, that are looking for a laugh and in need of a laugh. And I think when we look at a company like Netflix, even before the pandemic, they discovered that people, more than half of their subscribers were watching stand-up comedy specials, like more than before. So they're like, oh, we need to invest more money into more comedy specials because we discovered this super consumer of the genre. And then they started incorporating more comedy clips into their app just to drive traffic to their website. So there's a lot of ways in which comedy has an economic impact because people are drawn to it. It's a healthy way to cope, and especially in this day and age where there's a lot of stress in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell me, Leanne, all about plausible because I have to tell you that this is an ingenious and a convenient way to make people laugh and to make them money as well. So tell me all about plausible and the innovation behind it as well.
Thanks. Yeah. So plausible, I ended up after I experimented with other technologies, I was like, what if instead of cobbling together all of these existing things, I could actually create one thing in which people could come to for comedy specifically, and
Mm-hmm.
it would serve two types of people: our comedians, the people who make us laugh, and the comedy fans who need the laughs. So I set it up in kind of like a marketplace. Like if you're familiar with Etsy, right? You have all the creators who create and sell their products, and then you have all the people who are shopping for something that a small business created. So there's comedians and fans. So basically, my software gives the comedians the ticketing services, the virtual stage, and the scheduling tools, and a place to promote themselves. Uh, However, how they want, they can produce the types of shows they want at a time and day they want on our virtual platform. And then comedy fans can come in and they can sort through the directory of talent. They can discover new people maybe they wouldn't have other found because of geographic limitations. And then they can go through the show schedule and find shows that appeal to them and watch them in real time. So the comedian and the fans can see and hear each other. Everybody can see and hear each other without audio delays or cutouts, and as if they're in the same room together. And it's a very intimate and fun experience. It becomes more active rather than passive. Like when we think of watching someone's special on TV, they can't see or hear us at home. But in this sense, everybody can see and be heard and enjoy it in real time together.
Yeah, absolutely, and it allows the comedian to make people laugh directly from their computer, doesn't it? And it cuts down
Yep.
on travel in some cases, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can people can watch from home, they can watch from work, they can watch from their mobile device if they want from basically anywhere in the world. So it's really nice to see people uh outside of our own, area, our own country, and connect with people on so many different levels and have something to share with and be able to laugh with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leanne, tell me, I'm fascinated to get a comedian's perspective on entrepreneurial innovation, because as a comedian, you always have to be innovative and creative on stage. But how do you think that also translates to entrepreneurship?
Oh, I love this question. So I think it actually translates so much because as a comedian, I'm always trying to find new ways to look at a situation or an observation I'm making and to look at it from multiple perspectives. And I think as an entrepreneur, that skill set is very important because I'm constantly problem solving. I'm constantly going, why am I creating this? I'm creating this to solve somebody's problem. So I have to look at it from a comedian's point of view, a fan's point of view, a business point of view, uh, you know, um, People who might say, I would never do that. What's their perspective? That's important as well. People who would come and never come back, or people who come and come all the time. I try to find out what their needs are, what they're looking for, and maybe how I can better serve them. So I think similar to joke writing, I'm constantly changing the lens in which I'm looking at something to see if I can get a new twist or a new perspective to make the joke better or to make my business better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Leanne, I've waited all day to ask you this question, so I'm going to ask it now. I'm curious to ask you about life on the road as a comedian because, you can you can get yourself into some amazing situations and some sticky situations too. So tell me about surviving on the road as a comedian and what goes into that.
So, I didn't do too much on the road. I did book stuff, out whenever I would travel personally or for other business, I would always book myself. I've never been an actual road comic or a touring comedian myself. But that said, yeah, we can get ourselves into some interesting predicaments. I think, what I think this goes back to the other thing we were talking about, laughing all the way to the bank. It's tough because although people tour and can often get paid for those gigs, those gigs don't always cover the travel expenses. Sometimes you don't make anything. Sometimes you make barely enough to cover, some of your expenses, but not all of them. So it's a lot of sacrifice. It's not easy. I know other people who've done it. It's very lonely. You're not with a band, so you're not like hanging out with a group of people necessarily afterward or something like that. There's a lot of alone time on the road and driving. Yeah, it's not luxurious.
Well,
Yeah.
you just gotta make sure that you update your playlist all the time, right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I did travel and I did make a point of, getting gigs during my travels, I always was crashing at a friend's or family's place or, getting rides here and there and everything. There wasn't like a business credit card or a per diem necessarily that could be used. It was very self-service.
Well, I tell you, life as a comedian is a lot like life as a podcaster, right? Sometimes you do it for the passion and not necessarily for the money, right?
So true. Probably way more passion than the money.
Absolutely. And, Leanne, I'm also curious to ask you about the evolution of the comedy industry, specifically for women in general. And how do you think women have really sort of broke through the comedy sort of roadblocks to get noticed? And where do you think of the more work still needs to be done in order to amplify the talent of women comedian or female comedians specifically? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, so this is interesting. I think there's definitely a lot of work still to be done. There's no doubt. I think that there's been some improvements. I mean, when I look back in the kind of the history of comedy, there weren't a lot of female comedians. I think now in recent years, I'm I'm seeing a lot more. I know when I was in New York, for instance, and I ran an open mic, um, the majority of people that were showing up to my shows and my mics, the majority of people I knew were men, right? And I don't mean majority like all. I'm just saying like the higher percentage definitely seemed to be male. Um, but now I'm not sure what the numbers are on it, but I do know in my experience in having plausible and seeing who's active on my platform, I see a very diverse group of women who are producing and creating and more so than men on my platform. And I'm not exactly sure what that comes from. I don't know if it's because I'm a female founder of the business and that seems to create a safer place, or maybe it's the sense of being online and more accessible to people that don't live in the bigger metropolitan areas. Um, it could be a variety of those things for any one of them. But I do think outside of that, in the broader world, I'm seeing and hearing a lot more about female comedians in the news, and I'm seeing them use other platforms online also to promote themselves in new and different ways. So I do think it is improving, but there's quite a ways to go. There's still a lot of shows that are predominantly male heavy, predominantly men in the lineup and maybe one woman, or, you know, and I don't know if that's because in those areas there's not that many people, they're not connecting, they're not running. There's a million reasons of why that could be, but whatever they are, we can be improving them.
And one of the areas we can still improve is pay equity, right?
Yeah, and that I think pay in general is a problem in comedy. That yeah, pay equity in most industries. We're not there yet. That also needs continuous improvement. I mean, I know in working different jobs, even outside of comedy, I've never felt it's been equal. And I've actually been told before that someone would hire a man and pay them more than me for the same job. And
Uh,
oddly, that came from a woman. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a conversation we could continue to have for an hour, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so,
Easily.
there's so many layers to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've,
And just to add really quick, I even see like I hear all the time and I see on social media, so many people are like, let's help, women in business and people of color and LGBTQ and, persons with disabilities and all of the marginalized groups. And let's move this forward. Yet it's amazing to me because some of these same people talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk, so yeah, so I guess a conversation's a good place to start, but it comes down to a lot of action.
I absolutely am. I'm fascinated to go back just for a second about when you wrote and produced your own show in both New York and Washington. Tell me how do you think you've evolved as a comedian since that point in your career, and take me back to some of the highlights of that time in your life. Why do you like it so much?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I ask myself, why do I like this? I think so when I started doing it, I just loved it. It just brought me joy. It was going into an improv class. I felt like I was a kid, where I could go and I could play and be silly and just have fun. It was just such a different part use of my brain than when I would go to work, right? And then as time went on, there's this thing of like watching other people who I think are great and hilarious and so talented. And they inspired me. It's like, I want to do that. I want to be funny like they're funny. And so it kind of shifted, like, not just from playing and enjoying it, but to like, wow, I really want to be better at this. This is important to me. I have so much respect for people and their intelligence and the levels in which they can do this art form. And then as I evolved, what I've learned is it's not about a destination, because I'm never going to know everything about comedy. I'm never going to be perfect at comedy. I think it's a constantly moving target, and I'm always going to uh, need to know way more than I already do. And, but I also think that's what's attractive to it to me. So through this process, I think it's really made me a more resilient person. It's a lot of no's. It's a lot of silence when I not getting laughs to my jokes. It's a lot of rejection, It's very similar to entrepreneurial pursuits. It's a lot of no's, it's a lot of rejection, it's a lot of, like you said, how is today? It's a new day for lessons and a new day for new challenges. And I think in the pursuit of any dream, that's kind of what we're faced at. It's not, and then when we get to the end of it, it's kind of like, oh, I did it. Like when I put up my one woman show and I finished the run, I went through like 3 days where I just cried. And instead, I thought I would be celebrating, like big things would be happening. There should be a parade, like I did this big achievement. But when I look back at stuff like that, I'm like, it's not the final thing. It's the journey in which the growth happens. It's the doing in the process where I do my learning. It's all that stuff in between that grows me. And I think that's where the treasures are. And I think
Yeah,
that's what I've
yeah,
really learned.
yeah, absolutely. And as a comedian, you're a great person to ask this next question to. So, outside of hosting this podcast, Leanne, I also um, do some motivational speaking to organizations about
Mm.
building an inclusive culture because I was born with cerebral palsy, and I actually found out at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life without assistance. And I graduated college with a journalism degree, and when I graduated college, I was rejected by no more than 10 news directors because they told me I had a lot of energy and enthusiasm for the profession of journalism and becoming a reporter. I started my career as a sports reporter, but no one would hire me out of college because of my disability. They viewed it as a liability. So I'm curious to ask you about entrepreneurship, comedy, and rejection and how those things are interconnected connected because I think comedy and entrepreneurship, as you said, have some really interesting tenets attached to it. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. And there's a ton of rejection.
Mhm.
It's oh, there's so much rejection in both of these paths. And yeah, I hate it. I hate it. It's like it hurts, right? And it's funny because I was actually having this conversation earlier with a friend, and anytime, every day, I have to put myself out there, and I have to, if I'm going to pursue this dream, I have to share this dream and talk to people about it. And people aren't going to just come and discover, randomly come across plausible, but until it gets bigger and more known, I have to put, like in comedy, I have to put myself out there. I have to knock on doors, and I get a lot of them closed on me. I get a lot of no's. I get a lot of, please take me off your email list. I get, you know, um, you know, I don't like this. I want to do something in person. Um, and, and when I get those, it hurts. Like, this is my baby. Of course it hurts. I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. It's like, okay, I expect that. Of course those things are going to happen. But every now and then, depending on what else is going on in my life at the time, it does make me sad. It's like, okay, how does, and I have to look at it. So like today I called a friend and I said, I'm looking at it and this happened. And I feel really bad about that because I want everybody to like it, right? I want everybody to like me. I want to be accepted. I want the yes. I want to have this job. And that's just not always the case. And a good friend had once told me if everybody likes you, you're not trying hard enough. Right? Kind of like I have to get those no's in order to find that yes. And that one yes that does eventually come along, that's going to be the right yes. That's going to be the person I want to work with. That's going to be the person that I want to support. That's going to be but there's always going to be no's. I look at all of the athletes, right, who've gone out there and put themselves out there. They set records for, most hits or something, but then you look at how many home runs they actually made versus how many outs they have or how many strikes they've had. They've had way more of the bad ones than they do of the good ones. And, I have to focus on the wins and not dwell too long in my failures. And
Yeah,
so uh that's kind of my mindset is like I'll give myself permission here and there to like go, I feel really bad about this. I'm human, I do. And then I examine it. Is there something I can learn from it? Is there something that's informing me of how I can play better? Or, did I handle this in a way that I feel that I did the right thing? And then I move on.
yeah. The way I look at it, Leanne, is the more that you dwell on the nose, is less of an opportunity to celebrate the wins, right? So that's
Uh, Yeah, and that's just it. And I think it's also important to have a a a group of people to talk to because those people are always key. And and I do this with other fellow founders of like, hey, don't forget about the big win you had yesterday. Let's talk about that. Let's look at, the good things that are happening. Because good things are always happening and good things will happen. But there's a balance of both, and that's life. That's yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And Leanna, I'm fascinated to ask you, what do you think is the key to connecting with an audience?
Oh, I think um I think I like to think anytime I'm writing jokes or talking to people, um my audience I want to treat my audience with respect and um talk to the top of my intelligence because audiences are always so smart, whether it's one person or a group of people, never underestimate them. And I think that the key to connecting with them is giving them that respect and that dignity and also being truthful. We say in comedy, there's truth in comedy. That's why we laugh at it because it's relatable. There's a truth there. It's a oftentimes just shift in perspective or another angle to look at something, but that's what makes it so funny or, gets solicit such a response in people because they're like, oh yeah, I recognize that, I recognize that in that guy or this person or myself. And so I think there's an honesty there, a truthfulness and a respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leanne, tell me, why do you think people need more laughter in their lives?
Hmm. Well, I think for me, there's several reasons, and for me, I think it's always been a healthy coping mechanism. I love finding the funny and really weird things. So even though, like a minute ago, we were talking about like taking rejection and things like that, I may spend a time in it here or there, but it also informs me later of what's funny. I can look at something from their perspective and find humor in it, right? From getting that different angle. It gives me new perspective. It's a coping mechanism. It's also a tension relief, a stress relief. And, even in some cases, they've talked about where, um, you know, we often laugh at things that scare us. When people go on a roller coaster and they're like, ah, but they're scared. They're like, oh, that was so scary. Or they go to a haunted house and they get the giggles and they do things. It's just a healthy coping mechanism for so many things. And I think going back to how we were talking earlier of the economic impact, comedy is the second most popular thing next to breaking news. So it's super important in most people's lives.
And
Yeah.
it helps us lower the blood pressure too, right? So
Yeah, it does. There's medical benefits of it.
Absolutely. And Leanne, tell me, what do you think it means to think outside of the box as a comedian, and how do you think that's helped you as an entrepreneur as well?
I think when I see people in comedy who are thinking out of the box, I think it's people who are kind of trailblazing their own way. Instead of sitting and waiting around for someone else to book them or something to happen, those people are out there producing, writing, their own scripts and sketches and setting themselves up for success. I think I'm really excited to see, especially as an entrepreneur with a tech platform for them to use. I'm excited to see people innovate and how they perform and present their comedy online and use a virtual stage that can actually propel them forward. And, instead of resisting change, because change is inevitable, what if we embrace it and say, okay, you know, this isn't something I would normally do, but how can I make this work for me? What if this is something so, so different that it kind of sets me apart? And, you know, that's what excites me about innovation and people thinking outside of the box in comedy. Is just finding new ways to make themselves better.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leanne, as an entrepreneur, how do you think having the ability to make people laugh has assisted you the most as an entrepreneur rather?
How has the ability of making people laugh informed me?
How has it helped you the most as an entrepreneur? Do you think?
Um, I think I think it's I think it's helped me in ways because of how I look at the world from joke writing and from doing that. Um, I think it's helped me also as I do a lot of I have to talk to a lot of different people who aren't in comedy and present my business idea to them. And I think having a sense of humor and the skill set to do public speaking and those kind of things has really been beneficial, having those skill sets and ability to talk to people. But I think it also, that's kind of my world. So, and the having that skill set to talk to people that are my customers on both sides, whether they're comedians or fans, that's truly important as well.
Yeah, and Leanne, tell me, what do you think it means to have passion in life for everything you do?
I think I think it's important. So someone actually asked me the other day a, a, a question about being vulnerable and being thick-skinned in comedy, right? And I said, wow, I think both are so important, but what drives us to have the ability to use either of those two things is the purpose. And having purpose is so this passion and having something that we can hang on to. I don't know. I just think it's like that's kind of the secret sauce to living a really good life. Find something that really matters and have a purpose and pursue it. Because I wake up every day and I can't think of doing anything else, you know? Um, I love it because it does challenge me. I like it because it has something to do with something I'm so attached to and I'm passionate about from day one, from my first comedy class through now. And I can't imagine doing anything else. And I just think that that gives me a reason to jump out of bed, you know, and be like, okay, how do I do this? Because if it truly wasn't something I cared a lot, why would I bother putting myself out there every day? Why would I bother knocking on doors, getting a lot of no's? I mean, you have to really care about what you're doing to be able to do some of those things.
Absolutely. And, Leanne, what's your definition of inclusion in this sense? I believe that comedy has a great way of bonding people together and really creating this inclusive atmosphere of no judgment or allowing people to express themselves through laughter. So tell me about the inclusive nature of comedy and how important that is to really bridge sort of what I call bridges of unity together and bringing people together. So talk to me about the inclusive nature of comedy and its importance. What is your thoughts there?
Yeah. Um, that's, I think, one of the things that I love about it so much is how we can come together in a room full of strangers and find joy in the same things, right? We can all relate to so many different topics, um, relationships, family, work, all these different things that come into play when we go see a comedy show. And, you know, here all these people can come together and we can laugh, right? It's such a relief. And then going and taking it online, like one of the open mics I run on Plausible, one night we had, a group of people from multiple countries and everybody's in a different time zone and, speaks different languages and stuff, but we can all come together, tell our jokes, and we're all laughing at all of the same things because we're all human. Like we all have these shared experiences that we can talk about. And I think we have so much more in common than we give ourselves credit for a lot of the times in the world, you know. With what we encounter in life and different milestones and just different experiences no matter where we are in the world. So I think that's important. I also think when it comes to inclusiveness in comedy, I think it's important, like at open mics, especially where comedians. So for people who are listening, if an open mic is a place where a lot of comedians will go and they'll work out their new material. And oftentimes the audience is filled with just fellow comedians, sometimes the occasional audience members who are always welcome. But this is kind of a place where they can test things and see what the reaction is and the response, or go, hey, is this something, or was this too much? Is this too little? And get honest feedback. And I think when it comes to being inclusive, there needs to be places like this for people to test things and say, I had this idea. Is this something? Am I on the right path? Does this make sense? Is this come across the way in which it can make people laugh rather and bring us together rather than divide a room, right? And those comedians ask those questions a lot because it's important. We don't want to divide the room and we don't really want to divide the audience from ourselves. So we have to experiment and get feedback. It's vital. It's essential. And that's, I think, one of the big things I love about comedy is the response. We like to do things in real time. That's another reason that plausible is important, is because you're getting a real time response like you would in person. But that informs us so much of what is funny and what is not immediately. So how can we course correct if we've gone off target, or, we went too far, or we didn't go far enough? How do we get it better? So I think there needs to be safe places like that where people can go and get honest feedback and be okay sharing and cracking those things open to discuss for conversation. I also think it's important. I'll add this one last thing because this is such a good topic, but uh, having a space where so many different people from all over the world, wherever they are in different walks of life and different backgrounds, can come together and have those discussions. So like if you were to go in person in a club in a specific area in the country, you might only get this demographic of people because that's who lives in that area. But when you take it suddenly online and you take away geographic boundaries, suddenly you can get a much more diverse group of people. And I think that's important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just out of personal curiosity, I'm curious to ask you one final question about plausible, and I'm wondering what fascinates you the most so far about the dynamic group of people and different backgrounds that have used the platform so far.
There's so many, there's a lot of people, like, when I first started it, it was, through my own network and people that I knew, and then it carried out word of mouth since then, and I'm just fascinated, like, I never know who I'm gonna meet and who's gonna sign in and show up. So I continue to be impressed with people, um, trying something new and putting themselves out there.
Yeah, it's not easy, is it? Right? So anybody that does it on a consistent basis, we should all give them a silent golf clap, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And Leanne, I'm interested to end this way, and I'm wondering your thoughts on the successes, the failures, and everything you've learned in between as a comedian. What has been some of your proudest, lowest, and learning moments as well? And then finally, when you look at your life and your legacy, if you had to make your life into a comedy show and make it into a movie, what do you think the title of that movie would be? So you can take those final two questions in any direction that you wish.
Um, so okay, so the one of like my legacy, right?
Yeah,
I think so my goals have changed. You know, when I first started out, it's like, oh, I want to do all the things and I would love to do X, Y, Z and comedy and in acting and everything. But now that I've taken on this entrepreneurial spin in my journey, um, it's bigger than me, right? It's not really about me. It's about me making things more accessible to everyone else and supporting other people in pursuit of their big dream. And how can I give a platform? How can I give these people a platform to go out there and live their best life no matter where they are in the world and earn money for it, and also on the other side of that, provide comedy to those who live in places where they don't have access to it. You know, maybe they don't live next to a comedy club, maybe they've never been to comedy shows, um, or can't get there for whatever reason. Why don't we bring it closer to them? So for me, my legacy is changing changing the ways people can consume comedy that they might not otherwise have it. Um, that's one thing. And then the other part of the question, remind me again.
yeah, yeah. So if you had to make your life into a movie or a comedy show, what do you think would be the title of that movie, and what do you think the message behind the movie would be that you would want it to be?
Yeah, I think I think the name of the movie would be like Get Back Up Again. And you know, because it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up.
Aptly
And
named for a comedian, right? Right.
yeah, yes, so true. And I think the movie would be, ah, you know, it's funny. I tend to remember and the things that make me laugh the most are like the wildest stories of failure that I've experienced. I'm like, can you believe I did that? You know, but I think the bigger part of that story is like for all the really big epic failures I've encountered, they weren't for nothing, you know. It's almost like a rite of passage to get to the other side of something that's really truly glorious. And you know, if I were to look back on my life and change anything, I don't think I would. And the reason for that is because I have I have a husband that I truly love, and if I hadn't done some of those things and that had changed the course of my life for any reason and I didn't have that now, I would be really sad. Um, and I I I also think it's important to find gratitude in what I do have rather than looking at maybe what I don't. So yeah, it would be about that. It would be about the journey rather than, you know, look at me kind of thing. It's like, can you believe that just happened?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, Leanne. So I was born 3 months premature, and I wasn't supposed to live past uh, three and a half. And this past January was my 35th birthday. So I am
Yeah.
grateful for every day that I get to live because every day is another opportunity to make a difference, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
because life is all about the opportunities. I just very quickly, I'll share a quick story. So I look at life as a standard deck of cards, right? And we're all given circumstances in life, and it's, in my view, incumbent upon all of us to sort of shuffle the deck of cards in the direction that we want to go. And one thing I always tell people is, if you're hesitant to share your gift in life, then you're depriving the rest of us of your knowledge and experience, because life is about a melting pot of opportunities and experiences. And the only way we all grow is if we all share and grow together. Anyway, that's just my philosophy on life. And I forgot to ask you, if people want to get connected with Plausible, what's the best way they can do that?
Oh yeah. So yeah, go to plausible.com, plauzzable.com. You can create a free account. You can sign up as either a fan or a comedian. It's up to you, and enjoy comedy. There's a lot of free open mics and free shows. And of course, there's ticketed pay-per-views as well. It's all up to you on how you want to have your experience.
Absolutely. Well, I have to tell you, you've come up with an ingenious and clever idea, and I was really honored to talk to you today. And thanks so much for the time. And I want to thank you for the good work that you do and making people laugh, and your perspective on entrepreneurship and opening doors for comedians who may not otherwise have it. So I want to tell you that I respect and commend all of the great work that you've done, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking with you. I love all of your questions. You're so thoughtful. So thank you very much.